Welcome to another installment of Monday Q&A. I hope you've all had a fantastic weekend. To everybody who submitted a question for this week's Q&A, as always, thank you very much. I'm going to do my best to get to as many of those questions as I can. If you like what I'm doing here on the channel, you can support it in a variety of different ways. Just check the video description. You can also check out my new podcast with friend of the channel, Troy Navaban, called The Gear Podcast. Should be available on all your favorite podcast apps. That one is also linked in the video description. For now, I'm here to answer some of your questions, so let's go. I'll start by addressing something that some people did point out, and I'm very grateful for people taking interest in my general health. You would have noticed two things a couple of weeks ago. One, that I had like a bandage on my hand, and that I had a cut on my nose. And well, I guess the saying is, hey, you should have seen the other guy. But they were unrelated. I have eczema, and I don't know if you can see that at the moment. I get flare-ups every now and then, and I've kind of had this nagging flare up on this part of my hand, and it just happens to be something that I sometimes hit into the guitar. So in order to get around that, aside from the regular ointments and other treatments that I use, just bandaging it for a few days really helped. It meant that I was kind of bashing into it less, and it was just less sore that way. So thank you. And then my nose, well, one of the cockatiels that we have here just decided to fly into my face one morning and perch themselves on my giant schnoz, which is totally okay. They weren't trying to attack me or anything like that. They just probably saw a giant thing that they could land on and said, you know what? I'm going to land on Leon's nose. What's the worst thing that could happen? So thank you all for your concerns. Otherwise, doing pretty well here. No complaints. There were also some excellent suggestions from the last Q&A. I was talking about putting some foam underneath, say, the dead string length on a guitar and underneath the tremolo springs on a guitar that is, blocked or decked. Heat shrink, plastic tubing, and the kind of non-abrasive side of Velcro, some people suggested, which I think are all excellent suggestions. Again, if you've got a kind of solution that's elegant, cheap, and easy for somebody to implement when it comes to kind of stopping any sort of excess ringing or resonance on your guitar, feel free to share it in the comment section. You would have seen a strange Gibson guitar popping up on a bunch of my most recent videos. It is, of course, this one, which is a total mutt. Let's check out the headstock. You may recognize that inlay if you're a late 70s, early 80s Gibson aficionado, but the rest of it may look a little bit strange. So this is a Stetz bar mounted to the guitar because the original owner decided to, let's say, implement a Carla tremolo on there, and they hacked into the top. So there was a massive kind of wound on this guitar. It's since been filled, but that just kind of covers up that ugly hole. These humbuckers are by Martin A. Smith here in Perth. Martin made the double cream humbuckers in my Les Paul Standard that sound amazing. And check this out. This is the giveaway. Look at the size of that control cavity on here. There's something going on here, right? So this is a Les Paul artist. If you're familiar with the band Ghost, you would know those guitars that they play, that shape that's not quite an Explorer or a Firebird. That was the Gibson RD artist. They, in my understanding, came about because Gibson acquired Moog Electronics at some point in the 70s, decided to put a bunch of Moog style electronics in their guitars, and they didn't sell very well. So if it doesn't sell, put it in a Les Paul. This has had a refret by Tim at MT Guitars here in Perth. It's a pretty cool kind of Les Paul Standard custom hybrid. You can see the sort of Les Paul custom style binding on there. No binding on the back. There's this very, very generous kind of comfort contour on here. And then the neck has two ebony stripes in it. So now it plays amazingly well. It sounds great. Martin's pickups are fantastic. I've just got it wired up like a traditional Les Paul, but of course I am a goober and I wired the switch upside down, which is a pretty common thing to do. I think they originally came with a brass nut. This one has a bone nut, and I replaced the tuners. So pretty much it's just like the wood is the original thing on this guitar, and I guess some of the lacquer. Everything else has come out. The original electronics weren't working when I got this guitar, which is a shame. I would love to hear it, but there's these kind of two little holes on here for toggle switches and a big, big cavity on there. So I don't know, let me know some suggestions. What would be a cool kind of electronic circuit or a pedal to incorporate into a guitar like this? And maybe I'll look into doing it. I know some people who are pretty handy with electronics and making pedals. It would be a fun one to try to retrofit some fun stuff into this guitar. Let me know. My thoughts on the is modeling dead when it comes to guitar processors. We've seen stuff like the Kemper, which has been around for a long time. The Quad Cortex, the new Headrush Prime has a capture feature in it. IK Multimedia's ToneX, you've got stuff like the Neural Amp Modeler and Guitar ML, which use machine learning to create captures of guitar amps. Is that the wave of the future? Is modeling totally dead? Is there any point in having something like a Helix or an Axe-Fx? I think the salient point with all of this is that machine learning and capturing is very exciting because it's certainly a lot more accurate than other approaches that have been out there for a long time. But something like the Neural Amp Modeler, at the moment, it's exciting because it's open source and it sounds good as it is, and there's lots of people kind of chipping in, smart people doing smart stuff, but it's a plugin at the moment, and it just loads up captures and IRs. If you look at something like a Helix or like a Fractal Axe-Fx, one big thing with those processors is they do a lot more than just amp modeling. They have effects, they have great ways to route your tone and manage multiple inputs and outputs. They are audio interfaces. They have some pretty great user communities around them that exist. And they've got like 15, 20 plus years of development behind them. And those things are not negligible. You know what I mean? It's something that really, really matters in the long run, because when you go into, say, a Helix or an Axe-Fx and you want to add a delay, you've got not only a whole bunch of ways to get a particular delay tone, you've got these deep understandings on the back end from the developers about what people want out of, say, a delay or a reverb, and all the refinements that have been added over years of user feedback and advances in technology. I think if you look at something like the Quad Cortex, that is a pretty good example of something that promised the world, but then the developers have had to learn the hard way that having a really extensive library of effects is kind of a hard thing to develop. It takes a lot of time, a lot of man hours. And I mean, something like the Quad Cortex, it didn't even launch with plate reverb. It still doesn't have like a stereo detune, which for me, it's one of those features that I just love. And more seriously, they haven't added plugin support, which they promised. And, they've made some rumblings that, it might come at some point in the future. So while the capture side of it is very exciting, and while people are no doubt getting great tones out of those and gigging them, there is definitely something to be said about companies that have put the time in when it comes to developing these units. If you look at the progression of something like the, Line 6 Axis to the Pod, to the Pod HD 500, to the Helix, all that stuff has trickled down into really great boxes like the HX Stomp or HX Native. If you look at the Axe-Fx Standard when it came out, and then the Ultra, and then the 2, and then you look at the 3, the FM9 and the FM3, they are these kind of things that they almost live and breathe, and they develop, and the community has input into them. So I think it's less about how you get the great guitar tone and more about all the other stuff around the way it develops, the way users interact on the internet. I think just being able to interact with people from across the world with these things and get tips and tricks and know-how and expertise in there, that's really been the amazing development in the 21st century with guitar technology. All this stuff about amp modeling and machine learning, it's all great and it helps us refine these tones, but we're probably working in this final 1% of great stuff. The thing that excites me about something like machine learning and AI is the way it's going to work when we search for tones. Imagine just being able to bring up a preset, type in, I want to sound like Van Halen's Balance album, put together a preset for me, and having the ability for something to do that for you and have it sound great. I'm more excited about that side of the machine learning AI side of things than I am about the kind of capturing stuff, because we're kind of already there with great tones. Like the Axe-Fx sounds amazing, the QC, the Helix, they all sound fantastic. The improvements are going to be on the other side with the way we as humans actually interact with our gear. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. Changing pace for a second, I was asked about a few of my preferences when it comes to things like guitars, strings, tones. So what strings would I use on, say, a PRS McCarty or Custom 22, 24 in standard tuning? Still Elixir 10 to 52s for me. I really don't mind the difference between standard, down a half step, drop C, or anything like that on my guitars. I have guitars specifically set up for those tunings, but something like my Green Custom 24, it actually moves from standard, half step down, whole step down, drop C, depending on the gig that I'm doing. And I just leave the same strings on it. And that guitar is so well put together that it just takes it like a champ. I was also asked about kind of the comparisons between something like ToneX and the neural amp modeler. I'm going to point you to a video by Pip Priss where they did a null test between the neural amp modeler and ToneX, and NAM actually performed a little bit better. But of course, you have to factor into the fact that, ToneX as a standalone plugin gives you a far more sort of guitarist friendly workflow. Not that it's a perfect workflow, I'll talk about that in my upcoming demo, but the differences, again, they are there, but we're kind of existing in this very, very small place of diminishing returns. The other one was, the Headrush Prime. Loads of people asked me on my thoughts between that and the FM9. I think if you want the best guitar tones that you can get in a modeler, I love the Fractal stuff. The FM9 is incredible. I think the Headrush, it's still using older 11 modeling in there. It's certainly fine. It can certainly get the job done. There's a new amp cloner in there, but the thing that I like about that, and the reason I think it will appeal to a very particular musician, is that one, it's very easy to use, and two, it's kind of like a guitar vocal workstation. So if you were somebody who needed like vocal effects and guitar effects in one, maybe your primary role in the band is as the singer and as like the secondary guitar player, and you want something that you can just take to a gig, have it all in one box and go, then you might want to actually check out something like the Headrush first. But when it comes to like flexibility, depth, and that development that I was talking about earlier, the Axe effects, the FM9, the FM3, in my opinion, they are unsurpassed. Around today's video out, my dream gig. Who would it be opening for, or who would I have opening for us as Ragdoll? I feel like we've been super fortunate to actually play with some of our favorite bands and have those bands be incredibly kind and awesome to us. Like we opened for Living Colour a few years ago, and they were the coolest people ever. We were sound checking, and Doug Wimbish just comes onto the stage and starts introducing himself to everybody, going, "Hey, I'm Doug. Yeah, you guys sound great. I'm loving this." And when we came off stage, Ryan's side of the stage, like Vernon Reid was just standing there, and he was like, "Oh man, I love that." And he gave Ryan a big hug, and Vernon was easily the coolest person that I have met from any of the bands we've played with. So maybe that was the dream gig, because Vivid was one of the first albums I ever owned. I would have to say though, that Rush farewell tour that I saw, that made me emotional in a lot of ways. It was such a great show. It was just such a great performance, kind of like transcended my expectations. So I don't know if I could go back in time and we could open up for a band like Rush, or, go back in an era like the 80s and open up for, Kiss in their unmasked pomp, or a band, I don't know, like Sabotage. Would it be more about like the awesome stadium experience, or would it be more like the small club where you kind of get to play a show and hang out with your favorite band and just enjoy them as people? I don't know. Why don't you all tell me what your dream gig would be? Or if you've played an amazing gig, let me know about it in the comment section below. As always, to people who continue to subscribe, like my videos, watch my videos, share them around, I really can't thank you enough. A massive thank you to all of my amazing patrons as well. If you want to sign up to my Patreon, you get early access to some of my videos, you get backing tracks, you get some guitar tab. There is a big archive of material on there right now. And if you like the guitar noises I make, you should probably check out my band Ragdoll as well. All of our material is available online. The best way to grab it is from our Bandcamp store though. So have a fantastic week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.